Okay, everyone, this is being recorded, so no potty mouth.
I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here we go. All right, now we're good. Okay, so here we go. This is, as you probably recognize, our trusty English language development, LPA, the lesson planning assistant for California State, right? Y'all recognize this part right here? Anybody not recognize this? Is that a resounding yes from everybody? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so what I did is I went into the standards. I just went right to the standards, and so I'm in edit, and now I'm going to add my standard. Okay. Now, whenever you are writing any lesson plan, it doesn't make any difference. Because you were going to get a certificate that says you know how to teach sheltered instruction or English language development in a classroom that's taught in English to a second language learner or non-academic English speaker, no matter what the lesson is, English language arts, science, math, visual performing arts, PE, it doesn't make any difference. You are required to always add a California English language development standard. That's a common error in lesson planning development and lesson planning assistant preparation, that you will do a lesson plan and you'll get so focused on it being third grade math. You go to the math standard, you put it down, you write all this stuff, but you forget to go back and import your California English language development standard. You have to remember to do that. So now when you're in the English language development standards, you notice it says reading, writing, listening, and speaking. To develop language, you have to use language. And the only way you use language is in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So the goal is in any lesson that you're implementing, you want to provide opportunities for the students to use language in these 3 or 4 areas. Now, if there's not going to be any writing and you're not going to write on the board, and this is going to be, you're going to read to the kids and they're going to listen to what you're going to read and they're going to speak about what you're going to read, then you don't have anything in writing. There's no writing standard. All right? So you may not have all 4 of them all the time, but you have to have, unless you're going to have a completely and utterly silent class and people are just going to pantomime on what they're doing the entire time, there's got to be listening and speaking. So you're going to, and I bring that up because down here where it says language objective on your LPA, they're not talking about English language arts directly. They are talking about English language development. This is not clear the way it's written. This does not mean ELA. It means ELD. So this reading, writing, listening, and speaking that you click here is not about they're going to listen to the teacher and they're going to read the story and they're going to talk to their partner. It's about how is this child who speaks English as a language, English as a second language, based on their level of development, going to do that if they do not speak English as a first language. So if you are a beginner and you ask the kids to wax profoundly on something that was just read to them, you are asking the child to do something that they are not capable of doing. So you have to know what level the child is so that you can then identify what the student should be able to do at that language level. So your objectives up here are referring to reading, writing, and speaking, but what that's going to look like for this English language learner in your classroom. Is that clear? Because that's really, really important.
So I have a question.
Go right ahead. Who is this?
Christina.
Okay.
So in the written response, you're expecting us to write about a specific student that is an ELD learner and saying what modifications we're making for that?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Do we need to ever name a child's name, or do
No.
we just
You
talk
don't
about
have to. No. Because one of the things that you all do is, because you're in the state of California, you end up clicking down here that you have an ELD learner.
Oh, okay.
You say you have an EL learner, and I don't see any adaptations, and I don't see an ELD standard, I know you are not teaching to that child.
Oh, okay.
That's really important when you're doing your TPA.
Okay.
Because we ask you, every single TPA asks you, what are you going to do to make the accommodations to deal with a child that does not speak English as a first language?
Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this is where you get your practice about that.
Okay.
So let's go back to the ad. Is it over here? No. Let's go back here. Okay, so I think I'm already in here, but I don't know where it is. There we go. All right, so we're gonna, let's say that our lesson is that we are gonna read a story about frogs. All right, and we're gonna make this a third grade classroom. So we're in the listening and speaking ELD standards, and we're in a third grade classroom. So we're gonna click here, and then it's gonna ask you what strategies and applications. Now you're going to open this up. Once you know the level of the child in your class, for my students, and I want you to verify this with your faculty members, for my students, I just say identify one student, and that will be your treatment student. I work with other faculty members that say, no, do every single one in the classroom. And it's like, hey, my students don't have to do that because that's just too much. So ask your faculty advisor, how many of these ELDs are you supposed to deal with? You just have to identify one, or are you supposed to identify multiple levels? So ask your faculty member so that you get that safe address.
I have a question.
I have a question.
Yes.
So in the TPA, if it already says that the level has been determined as intermediate,
Yes.
then do I just look at the intermediate to get my tips?
Yes.
To include in my write-up?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. What the TPA, your first one tells you. The first one gives you all of your own scenarios.
Right.
And it will tell you, this child has been tested and their CELT level is early intermediate or intermediate, whatever it is. So you come here.
Okay.
Okay?
That's why I'm here.
So let's say that the student is an intermediate.
Sorry,
Okay, go ahead, Marissa.
Okay, not for the TPA, but in a
regular
realistic speaking, correct? I mean, they were just handed out, and I didn't receive one for my one student, which we're thinking perhaps he has actually already tested out. But that information, I've been wondering about. I looked at the CUME file, but on that student, it's really incomplete because he only just came in the middle of the year. So I'm just curious, is that normal that they get handed out mid-year, and are you just going based on last year's?
Yes. That's
okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they're usually 6 months to a year behind.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right.
So, but if you get a child that comes to you and there is no CELT information, but, you know, just through your talking with the kid, they tell you that they speak, you know, Spanish or Chinese or Vietnamese, whatever it is, in their own home. And so what you can do is just by observing the child in your classroom, you can begin to get a feel for what is it that you're noticing about how this child uses language. Or do subjects and verb agree? Do tenses agree? Does a child intersperse home language words often in communicating with you about whatever they need to communicate about? Is the child blocked from communicating at all because their language they don't have enough vocabulary. So you start noticing those things, and you can come here yourself and just begin to open these up and see what it describes, because these describe what the kid should be able to do. And if a kid isn't able to do this, then this is the goal you were trying to get the child to. If you say, if you're doing the question and answers, this is ask and answers instructional questions with some supporting element. And it gives you an example. It is it your turn to go to the computer lab? Okay, so if you ask those kinds of questions, the kid looks at you blankly, then you go, let me see, I'm just not sure what this child is. And I go comprehension here. Begin to be understood when speaking, ask and answers questions by using phrases or simple sentences. So instead of using full sentences, this child uses phrases, then you can kind of yourself say, I think this child is intermediate level.
Okay.
It's not unusual for a child to be higher in one level, such as reading, than they are at speaking. Because speaking requires courage. Reading does not. Reading allows you to look at the words in your head and figure out what it means. You have a lot more supports through the fact that you've got your eyes and your brain working together and no one is asking you anything. When somebody asks you a question or asks you to speak, you have to formulate the idea in your head. You have to find out what it is that's being asked. You then have to translate it from your home language into the new language. And by the time you've done all three of those things, you don't even remember the question. And then if you're doing it in a classroom in front of kids and the kids don't make you feel safe, you're afraid you're going to mess up. The kids in your classroom are going to make fun of you. And that's called having an effective filter. And that's why the children who speak English as a second language, but in English-only classrooms, will hide. And because they're very good at hiding, they can do their written work to a certain degree. They can read to a certain degree. But when you ask questions, they will hide. If you don't provide that supportive, safe environment and assistance with support to help them also verbalize, then they never will fully engage in language development. So let's get back to the speaking. Let's say we're with this child right here and we're asking and answering questions about frogs. We just read this book on frogs, or we had the book read to them, and now we're asking and answering questions about frogs. So you ask this child a question about where do frogs come from? And you know that you're going to be asking a lot of concrete questions. Rather than just allow that child to try to figure out how to formulate a sentence, because you're always moving a child from one level to another level. Rather than just let the child say, frog come egg, or frog come water, water, something like that. Give the child a sentence frame or a sentence stem, a support which will allow the child to begin to develop this level of speaking. You validate frog water, frogs come water. All right, you validate that, but then you say, now let's say it like you do it with, I always say it like a scholar. I know the kid can't formulate the full sentence, but I can give the sentence stem that says, all frogs come from water. So that's what it's called. That's an adaptation. That's what we want to see when we ask you over here. You say in speaking, there's going to be an adaptation. This student will use simple sentences and be supported by language frames. Now we know that you know how to work with this child. Or this child is going to focus on subject-verb agreement, and we're going to give them word walls or word charts or something like that in order for them to be able to support that development of the language. Okay? So we know that this child is going to only be able to speak in simple phrases, where other kids in your class are going to speak in larger phrases. Down here, when it talks about the adaptation, you say you're going to do Sadai. And you see how this is written? For my EL student, I will give sentence frames to help her formulate her responses. Blank work in our community because blank. And that's how you write it. And now we know that you know.
Can I ask another TPA question?
Sure.
Do we give an example of the language frame support sentence?
Not necessarily. The way that it's written, this will not, it will ask you, once you look at the student and what you notice where the student needs support, it does say, so what adaptations would you?
So not a must to give an example.
No, it does say what are the adaptations, and then you decide what's the best adaptation for this student.
I know, but do I just mention sentence frame, or do I give an example of a?
No, it may ask you to give an example. I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It never hurts to write so that your evaluator knows that you know.
Okay, so you would recommend to give an example as well, a relevant example.
A relevant example isn't going to hurt you.
Okay.
It's not going to hurt you. Okay. All right. So is everybody clear then on how ELD gets imported into this document? Because, okay, nobody said anything, so I'm assuming you're clear. Silence is golden. What happens is, what becomes difficult is sometimes what you want and what is offered don't necessarily match well. So it's not unusual for you to have to go to, like this one I did comprehension and I knew I was going to ask and answer questions, but if that wasn't going to be the case, I might have to come down here. They gives you two arrows to see if orally, identify the main points of a simple conversation. I mean, I don't know. It all depends on what you're going to be doing. But I just want you to know, you may not readily see it the moment you open up one of these language levels. Okay. So I'm going to go back. That was listening and speaking. And then you're going to come back again. If you're doing reading and writing, you're going to come here and you'll see now you have a lot of choices. Word analysis, fluency, reading comprehension, literary response. You have to figure out which one works for whatever it is you're going to do. You go in, you get your levels, and then they give you options. I caution you, whatever you check off, whoever's evaluating your work is going to expect to see that adaptation. So keep it simple. Don't check everything. Even if the kid needs everything, you don't have to check everything. Not now. In the real world, yes. In teaching college, not so much.
Quick question on that, though. If what you're doing in class will incorporate listening, speaking, and reading and writing, you do have to make sure that you have one for each of those
Yes.
categories.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And that's because that's part of the lesson. And so we're going to be looking at that in the lesson. And so that the expectation is you're going to address that.
Mm.
Okay, so now you've got this. You've got those imported. You were able to choose your standards. You got them all imported. You close up your lesson plan. And then like in any other lesson plan, the rest of it's the writing of what it is you're going to do. Okay, so now that's done. Let's get out of here for a minute. Now I want to take you to the new era of Common Core. These are the English language, California Department of Education English Language Development Standards, just for kindergarten. And I am giving you all, when I leave here tonight, in the chat area of the of this, of Zoom, if you will all leave me, Emma and Marissa, you don't have to because I already know yours. If you will all leave me your Cal State Teach email address, I will share the folder where all of this is residing on my Google Drive so that you will all have access to this.
How do we do that? I don't know.
Oh, I'll show you when I stop doing this, I will show you before I leave. If need be, I will just write yours down. Don't worry about it. I just want to make sure I get it so that you can, or you can always just send me an email. I just want to make sure I share the document with you.
Yeah.
Okay. So here is the California standards. I'm not going to read through that whole piece, but I am going to come down here. One of the nice things is they color-coded it, so it's a lot easier to see. Collaboration is purple, interpretive is blue, and productive is green, which is kind of nice. So what you see here are the interactions in collaboration, interpretive, and productive. Collaboration means talking to other people. Interpretive means doing stuff academically, reading and writing and things like that. The actual, the lessons, you might say, just down here it says, evaluating, analyzing the skills and the applications you want the students to use. And then down here are how they produce it in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Listening, not so much, but speaking and writing, how are they producing evidence of that language development? All right. That in and of itself is different because the language here is about common core language, collaboration, communication, critical, and creative thinking. So it tells you for this kindergarten, what does language interaction look like when it's done in a meaningful way? So if you're smart, you can use this language to help you even write rubrics for the evidence that you want to see when kids communicate with each other, when they're doing a presentation or when they're working in their groups. This type of language interaction is evidence of rigorous thinking and the college and career readiness skills. These are for every single grade level. I just happened to open up kindergarten, but they have this in every grade level. And then over here, it tells you the corresponding English language arts Common Core standard. So that's how they're embedded. When the student engaging information and ideas with others through oral collaborative conversations on a range of social and academic topics. Now remember, this is for kindergarten. Can you just imagine your kindergartners talking collaboratively on a range of social and academic topics? Mm-hmm. This is telling you that this is speaking and listening kindergarten standard 1-6, language kindergarten 1-6. So now you know where to go. I mean, listening kindergarten 1-6. So now you know what Common Core standard this relates to. Okay? That's how they're coupled together, which is different than what we had before. Before, you had the content standard and then this overlay of language. Now you have the overlay of language inside the content standard. Okay? So then you have learning about how English works. These are the conventions that deal with understanding language and being able to communicate. Mm-hmm. So it tells you for these language conventions using verbs and verb phrases, this is writing, and this is kindergarten standard 5, speaking, listening, kindergarten standard 6, listening, kindergarten standards 1.6, 1 and 6. So now you know how to go ahead and make, so that when you are doing your English language Common Core standard, you'll automatically know the ELD that's going to work right alongside it. Okay. Down here, the next phase is this is talking about, this is elaborating on the critical principles. Excuse me, let me close this up. There we go. My husband just came home. You know how we had intermediate, beginning, early beginning, advanced, and all those levels that I just showed you on the Cal State Teach website? Well, they still exist right now, but now they're getting boiled down into 3: emerging, expanding, and bridging. So that as you are looking at language development, the goal, which has always been this way, but the goal is students are moving into emerging and out of emerging, into expanding and out of expanding, into bridging and out of bridging. So that language is being developed along a continuum. You can read it. I'm not going to read all this stuff to you because you're all very highly intelligent women, because I don't think any guys are in here tonight. So I just want you to know how to read this. What's really important is this example that I want to get to down here. I think it'll help you when I get to this example. Where is it? Oh, come on. Where's my example? Shoot.
So there's no longer the beginning, intermediate. Oh, interesting.
Not in the new era of Common Core. Well, where did I see it? Hold on. It must be in the other packet. Okay. So this is the kindergarten. I think it's in my overview packet. Hold on. I had so many packets up earlier today. Overview. There it is. Is that it? Oh, shoot. Let me show this to you. It's a Bible, spirit, instructions, strategies, pages 1 to 10. There was, I will find this, so you need to see it before we go, but let me continue on. Because in the standard, it actually has an arrow that goes across when you're teaching in these domains. And I thought it was in this one. Sorry about this. While I'm looking, anybody have a question? Shoot.
Just out of curiosity, are they going to be changing the SELT assessment and analysis also?
I have no idea. None. No idea whatsoever. Okay. All right, so you see these documents right here? These are all from the state of California, and this is every single grade level through 8th grade. And then this is the overview of the standards. All of this is in the Google Doc. The overview of the standard, though, is interesting in that hold on. Because it's in this one. Here it is. All right. When you have a standard, when you have a standard, here it says English language development proficiency level continuum. So as you're teaching what you're teaching, it'll say early stages. That means the entry into emerging. As you work across emerging, what it looks like to exit emerging, to move into the early stages of expanding, which then exit and move into the early stages of bridging, and then exiting bridging. On the side, it then tells you what the mode of communication looks like. So here's the mode of communication. When students are collaborating, this is what it looks like in the early stages. Use basic social conventions to participate in conversations. To exit, this same collaborative standard now looks like this. Participate in simple face-to-face conversations with peers and others. So you're able to begin to structure the learning opportunities in order for the student to develop the language to exhibit these particular behaviors. Because when they exhibit those behaviors, it means that they have improved their language. And so that then gets you into this one, initiate simple conversations and so on. So this is the overview. And this is a really good document. I would say look at this document before you go to your standards in your particular grade levels, because it's fairly easy to read, and it provides a lot of very useful information, so that as you are, this will also be able to help you write any adaptation you need to in a learning situation that you're going to have in the classroom. You're going to discuss frogs. Oh my goodness, this child is emerging. They're only going to read very brief grade appropriate text. So that's going to be the adaptation. You're going to give them a modified text to read. So this will make it easier for you to even identify those adaptations. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes. Now, where is this document found?
When you give me your email address, I am
Okay.
going to share my Google Doc, my Google folder with you, and all of these documents are in that folder. I just uploaded them before we started this meeting.
A Common Core thing that's accessible to anybody?
Everything that you see here tonight and then some are all going to be in that file.
Okay.
Okay. And if for any reason that file doesn't work, you let me know. And if I have to, I'll put them in I'll put them in my Dropbox. But I want these to be available to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
This is
So
great.
it's really, when I went to this particular workshop, while the state is very tedious, this particular piece was presented by someone who was very, very good. And I just think that understanding the way that we're moving and how this works with Common Core is going to be very useful for you.
Yes.
Okay, so now before I get to strategies and activities for English language development, I'm trying to watch my time, is a couple of things that I want you to be aware of just as teachers. Number one, we often think that the child who can speak very fluently in our classroom, is very social, has a great time on the playground, and they do really well with their friends, and when they're discussing, they can discuss like crazy, but they're still failing in class and they're not reading and they're distracted. It's because they are proficient in fluency. They understand the social language of getting along in the world. What you are doing is that you are teaching them proficiency over fluency. Proficiency is academic language. Proficiency is the unique language needed in order to communicate in the various content areas that you are teaching. Because the word endearment, not endearment's not a good one. Oh goodness. First base means something very different when you're talking about two jocks in the locker room and you're talking to an umpire playing baseball. That one word has two different meanings if you are, depending on the context that the word is said. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're getting to first base in the locker room, it means a whole lot different than getting to first base because you hit the ball. So to be proficient in a language, you need to know the difference when somebody says getting to first base. And that's what you're doing, is you're teaching the context of proficiency in language. You were teaching the academic piece of language. So don't get confused. Don't think that that student that is really verbal in your classroom is proficient. What they are is fluent, and fluent and proficient are two different things. Secondly, a student that is proficient in their home language will learn English more quickly than a student that is not proficient in their home language. Because when you're proficient in your home language, you understand that there are rules in respect to language. And so learning a new language means you now just apply new understanding to old rules. You have a very solid scaffold. But if you're not proficient in your home language, you are trying to learn a language at the same time as you're trying to learn about all the conventions in language, and that language has rules. And you're learning this in a language that's not even your own. So it's much harder to become proficient when you do not have a solid foundation in your home language. And that happens all the time.
That's right.
That's one of the reasons why kids don't test out of English language development. But a teacher has to recognize that so you know how to approach developing the language. Respect the native language, validate the native language, but understand that in the classroom, they have to learn this to be successful in an academic, career-based environment that is English-based. Okay, so those are 2 tips that I just want to make sure that you definitely know. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, you're also going to get this, when I was at another conference, I went to my first introduction to Common Core, ELD Common Core. And this particular teacher teaches down by Salinas. And she has put together these wonderful websites that you can go to in order to support English language development. And I've went to some of them, and they're just a lot of fun, but you will also see a lot of information here that will help you to guide your students towards language development.
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
Of course, I'll go check them all out as well. But what do you think about students who just speak a very non-standard form of English? I see on there that there was homophones. I can't scroll back to, inference. Would that also work for some?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even non-standard
of my
English students.
Mm-hmm.
Marissa, they need the same thing as any language learner. They have a home language that has its rules, but those rules are not necessarily the rules that are governed in an academic environment. They also are probably lacking vocabulary. Vocabulary is essential. You must front load vocabulary. You want to make sure you have as much realia as possible. You want to make sure you have as many visuals as possible. And you want to front load the context for whatever it is they're getting ready to learn, so they have something to hook this information on. So if you're going to do whales, don't expect them to understand whales. You need to show them whales and show them videos of whales and ask them what they see in these movies and these little short videos. Show the video multiple times. A rule of thumb is the first time you show a video, just let the kid watch the video. Just say, you're going to watch a video about some whales. And then just let the kids watch the video about some whales. And then you ask them basic questions like, hey, what'd you think about the video on the whales? What can you tell me that you remembered about the video? And then they're going to tell you whatever it is they remembered. You're now actually doing a little prior knowledge, see what they picked up, but it's very non-threatening. Now, the second time they watch the video, you are now, after speaking with them, you know some of the things that they brought up that they saw, so you know where it is. You are now going to start framing your questions. We're going to watch this video again, and this time, I want you to look for these things. Now, it's going to be hard for them to look for those things if they don't know the language of those things, so that when they see it, they know they saw that thing. Like if you say, I want you to look for whales breaching. Now you can be in the 8th grade and somebody says, look for whales breaching. What do you think they're probably going to be looking for?
That's right.
The closest word to breaching is breeches.
They may not know that.
So they're going to be looking for whales in breeches. And that's because you've asked them, there's no context for that. So you ask them, I want you to look for when the whales jump out of the water. So now when they get back, oh, I saw that. Let me tell you the word that is. That's called breaching. Everybody say breaching. You have to use a word at least 11 times when it's first introduced in order for it to start to stick. And then you've got to use it all week long, over and over and over, before it finally becomes part of the lexicon of the language in the classroom. Okay? You can't just say breaching and then never come back to that, and then on Friday you ask them to say what the whale do, and they'll say jump out of the water, because they didn't have enough exposure of using the word. That's just a strategy you want to use. You want to make sure they say it at least 11 times, and not like, say it again, say it again. You're asking questions, and so what does the whale do? The whale breaches. And when we see the whale do this, they do what? And now he's showing them pictures, and it says, what's the whale doing here? He's breaching. And what does breaching look like? Jumping out of the water. Let's do a hand thing that shows jumping out of the water. So every time we see the whale breach, we're going to throw our hands in the air. So let's throw our hands in the air. And what does that mean? Breaching. You do that. It's fun. Everybody gets it. At the end of class, they've got a vocabulary word that's now stuck in their head. That's teaching English language. That's an academic language.
Connie, can you hear me? You're using, like, when you're showing them how, the whale breaching, using the visual, using the auditory, you're using those learning styles to help them comprehend.
Yes. Absolutely.
Exactly what you said.
Oh, hey, hi, how you doing?
Hey, yes, well, I was in the library recruiting, and here I am. Anyway, but I wanted to hear this because I think it's so important. They need the vocabulary development, if we don't give them that. So that's good. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's all right. Not a problem. I was like, I have to go on and find out whose voice that is. Okay, let me go back to sharing. Let me get back here. And all right, so this is just a resource, and it's a very good resource, but it's also a way for you to find things that you can do to help introduce a lesson, something you can do within the lesson, something they can do to practice while they're in the lesson, and then what they can do after they leave the lesson. Because even though they've left that lesson, you can't leave the vocabulary behind. They have to continually use the vocabulary or they will lose it. Just think of how many of you do ablutions every day?
I know this one. Me.
Somebody knows.
I do remember. Yeah, I will never forget.
So the thing is, how often do you use that word? If you don't use the word, you've heard it somewhere in your life. You probably studied it to take your SATs. But if you don't use it, you lose it. And for those of you who don't know what ablutions is, you can look it up in the dictionary. You can ask Marissa, or you can just go wash your face and brush your teeth in the morning. Okay. So that's one. This one is a glossary of Sadai terms. Now, you need to know these things so that you're able to understand what these strategies are and what they do. What happens in many classrooms, the teacher gets busy with the activity and forgets the strategy. I walk into a room and I see kids are busy, busy, busy. They're just as busy as all get out. And I can't tell why they're busy. I don't know why how this work is moving them forward. And then you ask the teacher, well, what'd they do? Well, they completed a handout. Great. Why? For what reason? Every activity has a paired strategy. The strategy determines the activity. So let's just say, I'm looking at this. It says an anticipatory guide. Students are given a series of statements that relate to a reading selection, lecture, or video. Students indicate agree or disagree. After the information has been presented, students check to see if they are correct. All right. So this says I'm going to give the kids some statements about something that they read, and they're going to go thumbs up, thumbs down. I either agree with it or I don't agree with it. And then I would have the students tell me why they agree or don't agree with it. All right. So I've decided that's the activity the students are going to do. That's what they're going to do. Why am I having the students do that? What is the gain out of doing that? So the strategy is I want students to do that so that I'm able to check for understanding, so that they're able to use language, so I can get them connected to the book before we start reading. You have to be able to say, I chose this activity because it pairs with this strategy. Or I have this strategy. I want them to be able to do X. And I think this activity is the best way to get them to do X. So please try to always remember to make those two things match. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So you have a bunch of them here.
And that's also in the folder that we're getting access to.
Everything you see is in that folder. This is from Cal State, so this is like this is from Cal State.
Mm-hmm.
Tech options for ELD. This is just another series of text options. I think that one's in there. I'm not going to close that one out. I'm not sure that one's up. I got to make sure that one's up. Okay. Let me this I know you'll get, and this is just a form that I created that kind of guides you through some lesson planning for just for language. It kind of matches what we do. It's just a little simpler, but you have your standard, whatever the standard is. Then you have your ELD, whatever the ELD standards are. Then you have the kind of whatever the concepts is, that part you've got out of the LPA, and your lesson objectives. Okay, so this says, given a series of images, the students will be able to complete an organizer, identify animals, orally describe, illustrate, whatever it happens to be. Okay, this is the language objective. If this is the content objective, then I have to figure out how are they going to use their language to meet that content objective. You want to preview your lesson, and this one was about whales. And I'm the only thing I regret is my computer crashed last year, and it took this entire lesson I have it in print, but I don't have it digitally anymore. But it's how to teach this kind of lesson. So they're going to watch a movie. This is some of the things they're going to do. You want to preview. Whatever you do, you got to set them up. There's got to be an anticipatory set. Something that hooks them or provides them with the scaffold so they can hang the information. Then you teach your lesson. And here, show it 3 times why you're going to do that. How they're going to fill out the graphic organizer. Identify. This is something people don't do on the LPAs anymore. You don't identify your vocabulary. We don't know what the target vocabulary is anymore. You just say they're going to learn vocabulary, and then at the end you say, I'm going to give them a spelling test. Well, it really helps if we know what is the target vocabulary so that we can see how you're teaching. Trust me, this isn't just for us. This is helping you to get the habit of mind so you can go from being a good teacher to a great teacher. Okay, then these are the sentence frames. This story is about the whale lives in the, so that they're going to have the vocabulary, and this is going to help that student be able to communicate. And then finally, whatever the process is going to be, how I'm going to check for that they were able to apply this information. And then they have the assessment. You have this, if you want to use it, you can. It's a real simple way to organize your thoughts. It's not cluttered with all the other stuff that's in the LPA. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. I just wanted to share it with you. Okay, that one, I don't need to see that again. I see that like 5 times a day. Okay, all right. Okay, I think that was the last, yeah, that was the last one. All right, so, oh, come on, Miss Bernice, go away. Miss Bernice does not want to go. Oh, Lord, this lady, Miss Bernice. Sit over here, Miss Bernice. That's a whole nother thing I'm on. Don't even ask. I'm sorry she's even going to be in the picture. Now everybody will see Miss Bernice forever. Oh, there she goes. Okay, good. All right, so you're getting all this Common Core stuff. It's in my, you'll find it in the Google Docs when you, I'm not Google, on my Google Drive when I get your information. There's a chat, and in the chat, I've got Sarah, Catherine, and Christina. So I have your Cal State Teach information.
And you've got mine, May.
Yeah. So are there any questions? I don't want to leave you if you have any questions at all.
I just want to give you my email, and how do I do it through the chat?
No, just give me your give me your, like, I'm CODA0209.
Yeah, I'm ANMI0909.
AMMI?
No, AN as in
Nelly.
yes.
ANNI.
No, ANMI.
Okay, I got it. Mary, Amina. And what's the number?
0909.
0909.
So it's A as in apple, N as in Nelly,
Mhm.
M as in Mary,
Mm-hmm.
I as in
Yep.
ink.
Yep.
Okay.
Got it. Who else wants to give me one?
I'll give you one.
All right.
So this is Karen.
Yes.
So it's KA.
I'm just Karen.
O.
Karen, give it to me again.
Yes.
Give it to me. Start all over again.
Okay.
B-O.
KABO.
V Victor.
No, B is in boy.
BO. Okay.
And then 0726.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I have Marissa.
Mm-hmm.
I have Emma. I have May. Anybody else? I have Karen. The two I just got. Callie. That's Catherine. Sarah. And Christina. Do I need any others?
I just sent mine to you. I chatted it, but I can give it to you again.
Oh, I
mean,
can get it off the chat. I can get it off the chat.
Okay.
Oh, Bethany? Yeah. Hey,
Yep.
got it. I didn't
I
realize.
do have one more question before.
Yeah.
Are you ready for it? It's about the content. Okay, so when you were showing us the new standards and how they're not in the LPA, but you did show us the language objective is actually the ELD language objective. Thank you. I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
But for the moment, technically on our assignments, we're still using the California ELD standard and then writing that into the language objective, or are we picking just the ELD, the old California ELD standard, and then going to the chart you gave us and writing that standard into the language objective, or you're just giving us that so that we know what's coming and we can start working that way?
I gave you the Common Core so you know what's coming. One of the things that we have said to our students is that if your school district or your school is using Common Core, you just have to say, we're using Common Core.
Okay.
So let's say, Marissa, for me, you wanted to start getting practice in using the Common Core. I'm your faculty advisor, and you say, hey, I want to get practice in using the Common Core. Can I use those emerging I can remember emerging something and then expanding and then bridging. Can I use those? It's like, yeah, I wouldn't stop you because I know that you're going to eventually have to use that.
Yeah,
But if you go like, no, I think I'll just stay with the old ELDs for right now because I just don't want to learn anything new right now, I'm not going to stop you from doing that either because that meets the requirement of the program.
Okay. And some school districts are in the process, but they're not actually doing
right.
So,
so you know,
work.
That's one of the things you would want to talk over with your faculty member. Okay. Like I don't want to step on anybody's. I can only talk to my students about it. But I wanted you to have what's there because you could still use, if you like the language that's in the new Common Core standard, you would still need to use, in all cases, in our LPA, in the area where the standards are, you are allowed to write in the standard.
Yeah.
You do not always have to import the standard from the link. So if you wanted to, you could write in California Standard, ELD, emerging, blah, 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 if that's what you wanted to do. That way it would satisfy that ELD requirement that needs to be there.
Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So I noticed in some of the textbook or some of the teacher's manual books that I was doing a math lesson and it had an EL standard already embedded in the lesson. If I'm writing a lesson based off of, loosely based off of what I'm using in that book, am I allowed to use that ELD standard and import that into my lesson plan?
Your ELD standard or EL, English Language Development Standard, if you can match it to wherever it needs to be matched. If
you have to match it, and it should
match it that this is an early emergent or whatever it happens to be, because the standard could be there, but you got to match it to the kid that you're using as your target.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay. Anybody else with questions? You just got to do it and then let us help coach you through it. But you got to remember to do it. That's the main thing. Most people just forget. And then you get dinged and you're not learning what you need to do because you're going to have language kids no matter what. Okay. Well, I'm 4 minutes over my time. So I hope you found this helpful.
Great.
Okay. Are there any other Google Hangouts you want me to do? Any other Zoom Hangouts you'd like to see in the future? I'm more than happy to do this. If there's a particular topic you would like for me to work on, I can do centers, I can do differentiation. I can do a lot of different stuff. If there's a topic, I'll be more than happy to put something together.
I don't know if enough other people would be interested in this, and maybe it would be a mini hangout, but reading about Bloom's taxonomy and question and leveling questions is not, it's beyond what I'm able to do right now. The really expert people who have those leveled questions.
Okay, so about leveling Bloom's taxonomy and leveling questions. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
All right. All right, everybody. Just let me know. Thank you all so much for coming. I will get this recorded and I will get the shared thing out to you while this is recording. So you should see it very shortly. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Thanks, May.
Thanks. It was great.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.